you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion for the sake of the world. This delusion, it's gotta go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Atheist Experience. I am your host, Russell Glasser, and with me today is my friend John Iacoletti.
Hello.
Today is Sunday, July 13th, 2014, and we're a live call-in public access atheist television show based in Austin and dedicated to promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We're available through live streaming at ustream.tv. The official Atheist Experience website is www.atheist-experience.com. You can provide feedback by commenting on the official show blog, which has an open thread each week. That's at freethoughtblogs.com/AXP. And you can also email us at tv@atheist-community.org. If you enjoyed this show, please check out our related podcast, The Non-Prophets, currently airing on the first and third Wednesdays of the month. You can find links at the Atheist Experience website. The next Non-Prophets will be recorded on July 16th, 2014. That is 3 days from now. And I will not be on that show because I'll be on a plane to Seattle right at the same time. But we've been training a backup host, Naomi Marmel, who will do a great job reading the news this week, I'm sure.
She's awesome.
She's pretty good, yeah. As always, the cast and crew of the Atheist Experience will be going to dinner afterwards at El Arroyo at 1624 West 5th Street, and will arrive around 6 p.m. So people in the Austin area are welcome to join us. We haven't said anything about as long as they don't preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch in a long time, but that still applies by default. Let's see. I got some special announcements going on. First of all, for a general ACA announcement, this year's Bat Cruise is going to take place on September 27th. I'm not going to say that people should come, but it's a pretty cool event that happens every year. And this year, before the Bat Cruise, we're going to be receiving a talk from both Richard Carrier and Chris Johnson. It's a double whammy, triple, including the Bat Cruise, so that's going to be pretty fun. I've got some stuff going on in the next few weeks. Tonight at 7 p.m., I'm going to be on a podcast called Prophet Cast. That's 7 p.m. Central, so look that up on the web. It'll be recorded. Like I said, I'm going to be in Seattle next week, and my friends at the Ask an Atheist radio program are there, so I'm going to be joining them on their show July 20th. And a week after that, I'm going to be actually physically in Abilene, Texas, where I'll be presenting a sort of Atheism 101 talk to possibly up to 140 Christians in the audience. So if you want to join and you happen to be in the Abilene audience or in the Abilene area and you would like to balance out that audience, I'll see you there. And that's all that I've got for today. Oh, except that that's hosted by the Abilene Atheist Alliance. It's happening at 1:30 on Saturday, July 26th at the Abilene Public Library Auditorium. Okay, that's all. Seriously.
Cool.
How you doing, John?
I'm doing great. Just got back from vacation, and we spent a few days in Salt Lake City, and that was interesting. I don't have like a topic, but I thought I'd say a few words about that.
Mm-hmm. That's a big Mormon town.
That is a big Mormon town, and they have a huge temple downtown, which is beautiful architecture. And we were visiting some relatives up there, and I've been to Salt Lake City several times. I especially like the family history library because I'm real into genealogy and family history, so that is just an amazing place to go research. So I'm grateful that that's available. But had never really kind of gone around Temple Square and seen the different buildings, the old Mormon Tabernacle, and we toured it's called the Beehive House, which was where Brigham Young lived. And so we went on a little tour of that, and they kind of have it set up with period furniture, and none of it's original, but they kind of showed you what it looked like and where Brigham Young worked. And we were shown around by two nice young women missionaries. One was from Cambodia and one was from Thailand, and they had really thick accents that were hard to understand. But it seemed like most of the missionaries there were foreign young people.
Oh, so we send missionaries over to other countries, and then those other countries send their missionaries right back to us.
Yeah, it seems like
to
it.
preach in the God-forsaken land of Salt Lake City.
Right, I guess.
Great.
But it was just kind of interesting. My wife grew up in Salt Lake, so she's been there many times, and we were touring the Brigham Young house, and everywhere we look, they present a real kind of generic Christian message. They don't really talk about Mormonism much, and that seems like that's something new. We were touring the house, and they were saying, okay, here's where Brigham Young worked, and he lived here with his wife and kids, and my wife kind of interrupted her and said, well, you know, where did his other wives live? And she goes, oh, you heard about that. And she said, well, he lived with his first wife here, and the other wives lived in, next door in what they call the Lion House. And I ran and looked it up on Wikipedia afterwards, and that's not quite true, but basically that was kind of the quick answer. And she looked really uncomfortable. And then we walked around the visitor center, and that's all real generic too. There's a whole section of the North Visitor Center that has these big, like 4 by 6 foot paintings of scenes from the New Testament, and they have, Jesus's birth, and they have the Sermon on the Mount, and you go around in this circle, and they have the crucifixion and the empty tomb and the appearing before the disciples, and then at the end they have him ascending into heaven, and then right there's a staircase that goes up to the second floor, and that's all painted up to be like stars and like a starry night. So the idea is you're going up the stairs and you're ascending into heaven. And upstairs, it used to be years ago, my wife told me, when you went upstairs, you got to see the Mormon stuff. So they have Jesus appearing in the Americas, and they have Joseph Smith finding the golden plates, and none of that's there anymore. It's all Old Testament stuff now upstairs. So it's
interesting. I remember during the last election there was some question about whether fundamentalist Christians would make a big deal about being represented by Mitt Romney, and I think the way they resolved that was pretty much to sort of whitewash and avoid talking about any details of Mormonism and just have people sort of pleasantly nod and generically say, oh yeah, that's just Christian.
Yeah. So that makes sense. That maybe that's when the change happened. But it's all very kind of generic. Any Christian would come in and say, "Oh yeah, that's I can relate to that." So
right.
I just thought that was interesting that they present that face to visitors when there's a lot more to it than that. And I'm no expert on Mormon theology or anything, but
that's because you haven't watched the Book of Mormon musical.
That's right.
That'll tell you all the details about Brigham Young. Some of them maybe not quite true.
Okay.
I don't think his AIDS was cured by a magical frog. That's what they say in the play, though.
That's something I haven't had a chance to see yet. But anyway, so that was my experience there. There's also something going on in the Mormon in the Mormon Church called ordained women, and that's a big thing going on right now where they're trying to get the church to accept ordaining women. And from what I understand, the leader of that group just got, what's the word, when you're kicked out of the church? Excommunicated. I couldn't think of the word. Excommunicated for leading people astray. So that should be interesting.
Yeah.
We see if there, apparently there's a pretty big movement, and it might be something
Well,
that
you
they have
know,
to
I
deal
mean,
with.
Catholics have been having the same fight over ordaining women, and I believe Baptists might have undergone yet another split because of the women thing.
Yeah.
I think we sometimes talk about religion being dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century because, you know, they have to coexist with the actual people that make up their ranks now.
Yeah, and they
So,
they kind
I mean,
of change.
that's
change with the
interesting that the
times.
Mormons are also going along with that, sort of.
Yeah, and I think they may be more than most, maybe other than the Catholic Church, are going to be the last ones to kind of to give in on that. But we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really all I had. We can
All right. Now,
start
you
taking
didn't
calls.
get to go into the temple.
No, they won't allow anyone in there. So, but there's a whole temple square there with a lot of buildings, and you can walk around and kind of see the other buildings. But yeah, not the temple itself.
All right. Well, that sounds fun. All right, 2 callers. We've got Andrew in Illinois.
Hi guys, I love the show.
Thanks.
Hey, Andrew.
So I was wondering, when people bring up the supernatural, it kind of confuses me because I don't know what they mean. And what I was calling is to ask what your definition of the supernatural would be, because to me, if something exists in the universe, doesn't that have to make it natural?
Have you? I mean, we could come up with definitions for you,
Well,
but
sure.
we're not the people who believe that stuff. So have you tried just when somebody tells you about supernatural things, just ask them what specifically they mean?
Well, generally the sense I get is what they think that there's things that we can't know.
Yeah,
possibly
which
that-
means they can't know either, and yet they're talking about it pretty confidently as if they knew what they were talking about.
Exactly. So, see, that's where I start to get confused and see when God ties into that. Because God's supernatural, or He should be, if you're going to worship Him, right?
I mean, allegedly supernatural is stuff that exists outside the natural universe, but then, you know, discussions always come up about if it's completely outside the supernatural universe, then how does it interact with or affect anything that is natural, so to speak?
But you can't get any Christian to agree on the qualities of God.
Well, you can't, and that's kind of a sign that they don't really know what they're talking about. You know what I mean?
Right, and so that's why it's very hard for me to make any kind of even a jump from, if you're going to say there's a God, so there's all the real kind of reasoning we have to do about that, but then you say it's Christian, you've completely lost me. It's
Right.
just like,
Well, the position of atheism, of course, isn't one of isn't one of absolute certainty and saying,
Right.
you know, the supernatural means this, and this is what and this is what I think about the supernatural. It's more based on withholding belief in stuff until you have a good reason to think that it's actually true.
sure.
And so,
Sorry, go ahead.
what you're free to say is, I don't understand what you mean by the supernatural, so I can't accept what you're saying about it, pending a more understandable statement about it.
Could you then accept worship in the unknown? Because it's fair to say that there is unknown, right? So we don't know yet, but...
Yeah, but when you don't know something, you don't know it. I mean, you don't attach attributes to something just because it's something you don't know about.
Right. So the closest I could come is worshiping the unknown universe, but I don't know what I'm worshiping.
Right, me neither.
Yeah, why would you worship that?
Humans like discovery. So, I mean, isn't that what life is about, is creating things and making our own reality? And that's what humans do, is they make their own reality and they construct
Well, yeah, but you can learn
they can
about...
they can learn the unknown, too. It's the kind of pioneering thing that humans do.
Eventually, maybe you can learn about it, but until you know about it, I don't understand why you would worship it.
I guess it boils down to what you mean by worship, but I can see exploring the unknown, but worship kind of is...
Spirituality maybe would be a better definition, rather than worship, maybe a sense of spirituality about it. That
See, spirituality is another one of those words that I don't really know what it means. And
Sure.
everybody who says that they are spiritual seems to use it in a different way that
hard
is
to talk
just
about.
whatever they want it to mean.
Yeah. Some people define worship as just to find worth in, and okay, well, you can find worth in, I guess, exploring something you don't understand, but then you're kind of getting way outside the bounds of what most people do when they're doing religion. So.
Right. Yeah, and that's as close as I can come to religion, because honestly, I look at some of these people and they're genuinely believing that there's a God, and that they're going to be saved, and they're going to see their loved ones again. And it does make me jealous in the sense that if it were true, and in their eyes it is, it would be nice. But I don't think that the unknown implies it at that time. But I think that there is a sense of wonder that they get in God as well, or in their God. So I think that at least we can have wonder in the unknown.
Yeah, but I don't think that atheists lack a sense of wonder. It's just that we try to be a little more pragmatic about it. I was just looking up a quote from Douglas Adams recently, the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, who said, isn't it enough to look at a garden and understand that it's beautiful without having to believe that there are fairies hiding in the bottom of it?
Sure. And the fact that we exist is amazing as it is. And when Christians say, you lose so much when you lose your faith. Well, I think that unless you have wonder in both what you don't know, but you just look around and exist to exist. Why do you need a purpose given by something?
Right. Sure. I think we're willing to just say, if we don't know something, we just stop there and say, I don't know, rather than I do know and it's X, Y, Z.
Right. We try to find out an answer, but we don't make up an answer just to remove our discomfort of not knowing things.
Yeah. Okay. But I am an atheist, but it's just there are things that we don't know, and my mom's done weird things that just seem spooky to me, like psychic edge of psychic things that just I can't explain. And I know that's not where I'm going to have to leave it, is that I can't explain.
Yeah, well, like Matt always says when he's sitting in this chair, I want to believe in as many true things and as few false things as possible, and that's why I remain skeptical of things that are unknown.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for clearing that up for me. Some of those definitions, even though we didn't really get to define anything, at least kind of see where we're at there.
Thanks for calling.
Cool. Thanks, Andrew.
See ya. So next we have David in Hollister. Is that Montana?
Missouri.
Missouri. No? Isn't that MI? Where's Hollister, David?
Yeah, it's Missouri for
Yay.
sure.
Oh, okay. You win.
How you doing?
Hi. Pretty good.
MI is Mississippi.
Hey,
Shoot.
it's really warm here.
MI is Michigan.
Ah! Okay.
Sorry, we digress.
Anyway, what's on your mind today?
I have a lot of things on my mind lately, but right now I'm actually excited to be on the show. I've tried to call on before, and it hasn't worked out too well.
We're excited to have you here.
Glad you got through.
I watch you guys quite often. I haven't kept up as I should, but I've been really busy lately and work and stuff. Anyways, I have a question for you guys, as well as I'll probably lead on to doing some commenting later on. But my question to you, as you're pronounced atheist, right, is what has not yet, what has convinced you otherwise of the existence of God, or the non-existence of God, should I say? What is in your conscience, what has convinced you that there is no God?
I don't believe in things without a good reason. And so, like many other things that people say are real, like ghosts and UFOs and Bigfoot, I look around and see what the evidence is presented for this God thing, and I haven't seen a lot in my life. And so, I take a position of skepticism and basically reserving judgment and saying, I do not see a reason to believe in God at this time.
Okay, yeah, I can. Well, my roommate actually believes in ghosts, so.
Okay, I disagree with your roommate too.
I agree there. I was I don't know. I don't think there's any ghosts in our room. Hopefully not. He's like, well, only if you go to an old building, that's where the spirits hang out and stuff.
Right.
But I'm definitely skeptical because I don't see these things, and as a Christian actor, I don't believe in ghosts. I believe in two spiritual dimensions. There's no in between, as in spirits. You're either in heaven or hell, and you're either living as a human on the earth. That's
Well,
how
I
feel.
also haven't really seen any evidence that would convince me of heaven or hell or a spiritual realm.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I've ruled it out completely, but it does mean that right now I don't see a reason to go for that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's the distinction. Sorry, that's the distinction that we make a lot, is that you kind of started off saying, what has convinced you there is no God? And that's not the position that all atheists take. Atheists say, I'm not convinced based on the evidence that I've seen that there is one. That doesn't mean that I'm convinced there is not one. And that's something that distinction that we have to make a lot, because people don't always grasp that not believing in A is not the same as believing that A is impossible.
Okay, so you still hold to the possibility of the probability that God is real.
Well, without evidence, it's hard to make any statement at all. You just say, well, until I see
Right.
some evidence, I'm not going to take a stand on.
Yeah, probability is a thing that's hard to nail down until you have any kind of concrete facts that you can make a probability calculation on. And as far as
Yeah.
God goes, nada.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, like I would need some pretty good evidence for my roommate to explain that there are ghosts.
Yeah,
Exactly, yeah, it's about the same thing.
Well, he
And
said
like
there's-
watching the
well,
movie Ghost might be seen as evidence for some people, but I
Yeah,
would
well,
just look at
yeah.
that and say, well, that's just a movie, which is kind of the same thing I would say about the Bible for the most part.
All right. Well, I would have to disagree on that because
Okay.
as I see the Bible, I'm one of those people that believes that the Bible is an inspired word of God that was written through man. So there may be flaws, but it's not of God's doing; it's of man's doing. When I see the Bible, I see a put together amount of books
Right.
written by men over different periods of time.
Yep.
That's one thing that's very interesting because you look at the time periods of the Bible that is written, which I don't actually have the facts right now of what it was, but they were written over different periods of time. So like some of the Gospels were written pretty much the same era, but like the Old Testament,
More or less within a few decades.
yeah, it was written in quite a different expanse of time. But these
Okay.
men were all inspired by the same thing, which is often
Well,
referred
you
to
know, they were also collected and put together by a council like several hundred years later. Like there were a lot of apocryphal books that could have been included in the Bible, but basically several groups over history went through and said, we like this book, this other book's out of here. And so there are a lot of different books that have been assembled
like
and
Book
called
of
the Bible
Enoch.
now.
Got rid of that one. It's too crazy with all the demon-possessed animals.
Yeah,
and
and
all
yet
that.
for some reason they decided the Book of Revelations could stay, which is
yeah,
pretty
there's a lot of-
trippy.
it has a lot of imagery in it, that's for sure. And
Right.
But it wasn't one cohesive whole until whole text. I think is what the point Russell's trying to make is you can't say, well, this Bible fits together so well because it was made to fit together so well.
Yeah, and even the way they did put it together, I don't think it fits together all that well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there are
As a-
threads running through it that you can trace, but there are quite a lot of things that don't make sense when you put them together.
True.
Yeah, my view on that is that as an inspirational text that was read again and again to the people of the believers and the Israelites, people would notice quite a significant change. And Christians and religious believers of the Israelites and those people they agree with the Old Testament. The only controversy really is the New Testament with and the Gospels and all that.
Well,
Because
what do you mean agree? Do you mean that it's definitely true that there were floods covering the entire world and talking snakes and the earth is 6,000 years old and stuff like that?
Yeah, talking snakes, that's a crazy one.
Well, do you think that happened?
I believe it happened, but not in that
Okay.
context you believe in. Not like, some actually physically. It's more like the snake probably talked to them in a conscious state, kind of like,
Okay, so there.
some people do telepathy or something like that.
So you say that you think the Bible is inspired, but not directly from God. But even the parts that are in there, you don't seem to take them all that seriously. Am I right? I mean, when I read a book that said the serpent came up to them and he said, quote, blah, 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 unquote, that's pretty straightforward that there was a talking snake. If I was going to stretch it a point and say, well, maybe he was talking to them spiritually, it seems like at that point I'm just making up my own book that is sort of like the Bible and not really taking the Bible itself that seriously.
Uh-huh. That's how you see it. It's kind of like telling a story, really, of something that's real. If you look at myth and its mythology and all that.
Mythology, yeah.
People were telling stories that completely, unrealistic,
Absolutely, and the Bible is right along with them.
But yet they related to something that inspired people in their real realm. They saw it amongst them. If you think the Greeks were one of the first great civilizations, they saw, wow, there's something great about us, about our intelligence, and about how we're getting together in these new communities of people and different beliefs. And
well, yeah, some of them.
Relates to this
some of them believed that the gods were big party animals who lived on a physical mountain somewhere and sometimes came down and got drunk and had sex with women. And had
offspring.
bastard half gods like Hercules.
Yeah. I don't believe. I'm not saying it was real. But
right. Well, I mean, there's all kinds of myths, and when historians look back at stuff and try to decide what's true and what's not, they tend to, give some more credit to big events that were recorded by many different sources, and maybe discount the more superstitious stuff, like, let's say, Julius Caesar was a god in human form. People believe, historians believe that Julius Caesar existed, probably, but they don't believe that he was a god, even though the same text said both things. And I think that that's what you'd find historians generally say about the Bible, where they don't take seriously, or they don't have an opinion, academic historians don't, that, let's say, Jesus was the Son of God, or cured people by touching them, or anything like that.
Oh yeah, well, it's interesting to see what historians say, because I've had a lot of historians say that the biblical record is quite accurate, but that's not really why
I don't think you have.
I really haven't called to talk or argue about this.
All right.
What I mainly wanted is kind of your explanation, and I know you all say that we have the burden of proof, but don't we all have the burden of proof? Because, I think real knowledge, just like Confucius says, real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. All humans are flawed in understanding absolutely everything, and we can all agree on that, correct? But
I don't know about absolutely everything. I think we've made some pretty good headway into a lot of different topics. But I will agree that there are a lot of things we still don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that we still don't know, so we can agree on that.
But the burden of proof rests on the person who's making the claim. So if I wouldn't agree that we all have the burden of proof universally. It depends on what you're claiming and what that's based on.
And so, what would you claim in yourself as? Like I asked in the beginning of this talk, is what has convinced you to claim that there is no God? There must be something. Is it evolution? Is it, something that?
Well, what convinced you not to believe in ghosts?
What has convinced me not to? Oh yeah, here it is. I haven't seen signs that point out that there are ghosts, or natural phenomenon that point that there possibly could be a ghost causing these things, and then matching the possibility with the supernatural phenomena.
So Do you believe in ghosts or not?
I do not.
Okay, and
Believe
why?
in spirits? They're different. They're different.
Okay,
things.
but why not? Just because the Bible says there are no ghosts?
Because I
he
have
hasn't
not
seen
seen
evidence.
them.
Oh.
The Bible mentions spirits. It doesn't mention ghosts, really.
Okay,
And
so
that's pretty much the same.
Things we don't know. See,
Right.
I accept that I'm ignorant. I may not know that they're actual ghosts or
yeah,
spiritual
and neither do we know that there isn't a God. It's just that we don't believe in something like that without good reason or evidence.
Yes, and I wouldn't either. You see, I wouldn't believe in ghosts. I still don't.
Okay, but God.
And if I showed you an episode of the Ghost Hunters and said, "Hey, look, these guys, you know, they went around and they had these instruments that, you know," would that be enough to convince you that you know somebody else said that they had evidence of a ghost? Would that be enough for you, or would you be skeptical of that claim?
I would not accept it because like in the Ghost Hunters, the natural things or the things that they present as being a supernatural interference with the natural of the ghost. You know, the ghost is moving a door open or whatever. That's completely bogus because I've been in old houses before and there's air currents that cause, you know, doors to creak open. Floors often in big buildings make these creak sounds. So
Yeah, but you don't know for sure that there aren't any ghosts. You were just
I
saying
do
there
not
are
know for
other
sure.
things that could equally well explain it.
That's not your first explanation.
Right.
Yeah, it wouldn't be my first. But I am convinced myself that there is God.
Why?
And he is involved with this world and he cares for humans.
Why? I
Why do
know
I
what
believe
you
there's
believe.
God?
I want to know why you believe that.
I believe because not only have I, of course you guys are going to be like, oh no, oh brother, but don't freak out. Yes, I have accepted him into my life as Jesus Christ and all that good stuff.
Didn't you believe
But-
in God before you accepted him? One of them would seem to be a
I was
necessary
a
requirement of the other.
I was sort of a skeptic. I believe that there definitely could be a God. He was separate because I've seen a lot of hurt in my life.
Okay, so
but
what changed your mind?
what changed my mind was the moment that I became convinced, or I gave my life to Christ, I had a willingness to try this thing out called Christianity.
So
And
you
I'm not-
decided to start believing in God, but you were never presented with any reason or evidence. You just
I
said, let
decided-
me try
yes.
believing this, and then once you believed it, lo and behold, you believed it.
Yes, I accepted
Okay.
this Christ in my life, and after that point, I began to seek. It says, if you seek me, then you find
Okay.
open
What
eyes.
did you find that maybe would be convincing to us?
To you guys, okay. Well, it may be not extremely convinced because you guys are going to give probably
Okay.
like your own explanations and stuff. But what I see is a comparison, so many comparisons between the Word of God and the natural order of things of nature.
All right, I
And-
got a question
and it-
for you.
Yes.
Which existed first, trees or the sun?
I don't know. I'm not going to. If it's about Genesis, I really don't want to get into it.
Okay,
because
so you don't
the whole-
take Genesis seriously. We've already established that.
I take it seriously that it's in a
Okay, so
order that it-
when you
it's-
say that the Bible somehow mysteriously matches up to things that we've actually learned about the real world, you don't mean the actual literal things that were written in the Bible, because when you read what's written in the Bible, trees were created by God, and then the sun, which doesn't match up at all to what we know about the natural world.
That's just a misunderstanding, I'm sure.
Right, so
Of the fact.
we just think the Bible is one big misunderstanding. We don't see any reason to take it seriously or to look for contrived matches with science. There's just no point.
No, it's your misunderstanding, not the word.
Oh,
The
we
word
don't
is,
understand. When the Bible says God created trees on day 2, 3, what was it? And then the sun on day 4, we don't understand what it's saying?
Yes, you don't understand.
Okay.
You understand what you're saying. Yes, you see what the words are saying, but you don't what do you call it? Read between the lines. You're not looking to deep enough.
So the Bible matches the real world as long as you make up your own version of the Bible that says what you want it to say.
No, I'm opposed to that in all ways because that's actually.
But you're
blasphemous.
doing it.
I'm doing it. How am I doing it?
By ignoring the things that are actually written in the Bible and just saying that you have to reinterpret them so that they match what we know about science now.
Yeah, it's just the way the Bible is written it's different than modern text, and many scholars agree
Apparently in modern texts, up means down. I mean, in biblical world, up means down.
I guess the trouble I would have if I considered the Bible to be inspired text, I would really struggle with how to tell the difference between the stuff that's literally true and the stuff that's myth and the stuff that you have to read between the lines. It's what basis do you have of looking at those things and deciding which is reliable information and which isn't. And I think at some point you have to rely on your own knowledge and your own instincts. And that's kind of what we're doing too. We just don't try to fit the Bible into that.
Yeah, I could see that from your point of view, and I can understand why atheists in general just really, how you read into the scriptures and you're really like, wow.
Hey, David, we've been talking for coming up on half an hour now, and I think we need to move on to other callers, but you are absolutely welcome to call back another week, okay?
All right, well, next time we call back, if I can, I could talk a little bit more about an author called John Lennox. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Okay.
He gives pretty good evidence as well. And I haven't presented my evidence yet, but
all right.
maybe
well, we'll talk about that next time, or maybe you and Matt will talk about it. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, I'll talk to Matt. It's great talking to you guys.
All
right.
right.
Thanks.
See you, David.
I appreciate the calm discussion too.
Bye.
Yep.
Valerie in Pennsylvania.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, Valerie.
Hi. Thanks for getting to me. I'm so nervous. This is my first time calling to a
don't be
radio
nervous.
show, so
We're just some idiots on
I listen to
TV.
you all the time, and I wanted to call in.
Well, thank you very much for calling. What's on your mind today?
Well, I am a Christian.
Okay.
I believe in Jesus, and I just wonder what led you to be an atheist, or both of you. I'm sorry, I don't know your names, but
I'm
what
Russell.
led you both to?
Russell, he's Russell and I'm John.
Hi, Russell and John.
Hi.
Hi, Valerie. You want to go first?
Sure. Nothing really led me to become an atheist. I've talked on previous shows that I wasn't raised in a religious family, so I'm kind of a default atheist. I've never been a theist. Most people in our group, and probably atheists in general, deconverted from something else.
Yeah, me too. We happen to be two of the people who were just raised in unbelieving families. My parents are both sort of nominally Jewish, but mainly unbelievers.
Okay.
So I was never particularly raised to believe in God, whereas the other regular host, Matt Dillahunty, if you watched him, he was a Christian for like 30-something years and was thinking about becoming a minister at some point. So we come from all kinds of backgrounds.
Okay.
But we happen to be two of the people who just never were into the whole Christian thing.
Yeah, so we didn't ever change our minds. We just never believed because we didn't really have a good reason to.
Yeah, which is not to say I didn't go looking for reasons to change my mind. I mean, I've been to a number of churches. I've spent a lot of time listening to Christian radio and reading Christian theology, and I just never found any of it convincing enough to make the switch.
I guess that's a bit where I am the other way, because I grew up in a Christian home. My parents are ministers, and you know, I have questions, and I have questions about the things that I believe, I find that you folks have questions about. But it seems the more I read the Bible, and as I've gotten older, my beliefs have been strengthened.
Okay. Well, here's a general outlook of what I would say I think about God. there have always been there's always been sort of a appeal to the supernatural to kind of fill in the gaps of things we don't know. One of the examples that I like to bring up a lot is that a long time ago in ancient Egypt, they didn't know how come the sun rose and set all the time, right? So they decided that the story was that there was one among many gods named Ra who carried the sun across the sky in his barge every day and then went back to the west or to the east in a series of underground tunnels so that he could take his chariot up again. You know, that was an explanation that they had at the time, but the more that we studied the reality of the way the sun moves relative to the earth, the more that just wasn't necessary anymore and didn't make any sense. You see what I'm saying?
I definitely see what you're saying. Do you think, though, that maybe God has put eternity into our hearts? I mean,
No.
why do we look for him in the... Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I don't know that we necessarily look for God specifically. It's just that in a lot of cases we are really uncomfortable with not knowing the answers to everything, and so we make up answers to feel satisfied that we are omniscient in some way of our own.
Okay. That makes sense. I don't know. I feel like God has changed my life. I feel like he has given me experiences and insight that has made my life exponentially better.
It's better than mine, you mean?
No, better than mine previously.
But you said you were always a Christian.
Oh, I grew up in a Christian home. I don't know if I was always a Christian.
All right.
I wouldn't say that.
Can you give me an example of one of these experiences? Or, I mean, you know, if you want to share it.
I can certainly. My mom was diagnosed with a blood disorder.
Okay.
And they called her and said, you have this blood disorder. And I heard God sort of say in my spirit, she doesn't have it. Not that she'll get healed, not that she'll get better, but she doesn't have it.
Okay.
It turned out the doctor made a mistake, and he called back and he said, you don't have this.
Okay.
Now, that
So,
is,
with or without God saying this thing to you, she wouldn't have had the blood disorder, right? The doctor made a mistake there.
he did make a mistake there, yes.
Okay.
But why did I hear that? Because I tend to be a negative, the glass is half empty person.
Have you ever heard of something called confirmation bias?
No, sir.
You should check it out because it's really interesting. It comes up a lot in psychology studies. Basically, when people have experiences that confirm the things that they already sort of believe, they tend to remember that and count it as a hit. Whereas when they have experiences that don't match the picture of the world that they already have in their heads, they tend to kind of like ignore it or make excuses about it or overlook it entirely. And what I would say is that people throughout their lives have different feelings about the way things are going to turn out. Like they may feel like, oh, my team is totally going to win the baseball game. Oh, my stocks are going to go up. And when things turn out good for them, they say things to themselves like, oh, that feeling I had was really, really accurate. I must have magical powers, or I must have God whispering in my ear. But sometimes you get a feeling like,
I really did hear him.
My team is going to win the baseball game, and then you lose, and then you think, oh, I must have understood that feeling wrong.
Well, I understand that. I could definitely see how that would play out.
Right.
But I heard something that was not from me. Like, I don't want to say it was an audible voice, but and you talk about the Bible, or I overheard a little bit of the Bible conversation, and I felt like God was talking to me and telling me passages from the Bible, and I read later that they were in fact passages of the Bible before I had ever read them.
Okay.
So
if you grew
like
up
I said,
in
you don't know me, so you might
No, I
not
don't.
believe me.
You're right. No, I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm just saying that I don't know what experiences you've had or how you've adjusted your memories after the fact, which is also a thing people do.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to say. We weren't there. We can kind of guess what might be some explanations for what you experienced, but only, you're the only one who experienced it.
Right.
Well, yes, that is true.
But we kind of are going to look at it skeptically and say, okay, well, what's a scientific way of possibility of explaining that? I guess my question to you would be, how did you know the voice you heard was God?
Well, and I asked, I questioned that myself, but I guess it's because, I heard a quote from Richard Dawkins say something like, if you were a Buddhist or something, I don't know the exact quote, you would think that, Buddha or whatever answered your prayer.
Right. Yeah.
Right, that's your framework, in other words.
But
Exactly.
I guess my reading of the Bible has sort of confirmed, the Bible says certain things about God, and that has been shown in my life at least. And so that's kind of where I get the confirmation that I am.
Let me ask you, have you explored a lot of other religions? As deeply as you've invested yourself in Christianity? Like, have you looked into, let's say, Islam or Mormonism?
I have not looked into
source.
Islam. I have looked into Mormonism.
Okay.
I studied a lot of the Greek mythology and that type of thing, and I have looked into atheism.
So I would imagine that when you looked into Mormonism, you saw a lot of claims and you felt skeptical about, let's say, the angel coming to Joseph and giving him a new book of the Bible on a bunch of golden plates, right?
Well, I felt skeptical, but I think the reason I felt skeptical was because the fruit of it or the outcome of it. I think Joseph Smith had several wives. I don't know if he treated them all correctly.
Although that doesn't make him wrong. That doesn't make him
but
factually
I think someone
wrong.
inspired by God probably wouldn't.
Well, you think
Abuse
that
women
because
and
you're
children.
working in the framework of Christianity. There's kind of a cool way of approaching, of wondering about your own religion. I think John Loftus was the guy who brought it up. He called it the outsider test, which is like, if I were looking into my own religious beliefs and I weren't already, and if I were coming from it from the perspective of a different religion, would I find this convincing? So, like, if you approached Christianity the same way you approached Mormonism, would you find the Jesus Christ story or the Noah's flood story, let's say, as convincing as you do now? And how much of it is just you've been told that it's true?
Well, I suppose you are right about that. But isn't that the same with really any experience? I don't have
Kind
children.
of. But that's why
I don't know
it's
what it's like to have children. And isn't any
Okay.
experience you kind of have to live it to
you
believe it?
You don't really have to live everything to understand it. You may not have children, but you agree that children are real. You've seen
sir.
them. And I'm sure that you've talked to a lot of different parents and collected a lot of different experiences that match up to some degree.
Yes.
So you can get some kind of consistent picture of what parenting is like. Whereas it always seemed to me that with religious experiences, everybody has this wildly diverse experience of what this God thing is based on their cultural background and their expectations.
Do you think that's because people are different, though, and people have different needs and desires and fears?
I would say that people having different needs and desires and fears don't affect objective things like, let's say, child development. Like, for instance, every child is born, let's say between 5 and 15 pounds, give or take. and and they're born from certain parts of the body, and they're born through certain processes, and you can verify that over and over again and come up with a coherent and consistent picture of how childbirth and basic child development works that applies everywhere in the world, isn't subject to subjective experiences.
Okay.
Whereas
I do see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I do.
Whereas with God, I'm just saying that everybody seems to see what they want to see.
Well, I do, and I see what you mean, and I think sometimes people do sugarcoat the Bible. There are things in the Bible that are very honest, and maybe one doesn't want to believe, but...
Well, like I said to the last guy, talking snakes?
Now, see, I do believe... I believe that the Bible is essentially inerrant and completely true.
So you do believe in the talking snake?
I actually do.
The last guy
hope
didn't.
You don't think I'm crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy, because I think that you've been reinforced by a lot of other people's opinions. I think you're mistaken, though. There's a difference there.
Okay, why do you say that?
Because I don't see a lot of talking snakes or indication that snakes have vocal cords,
Okay, I've never seen a talking snake, but
Right.
and I don't want to chase rabbit trails here.
Or
But
snakes.
did you hear the story about the lions in Ethiopia?
What about them?
In Ethiopia, girls who are about 13 can get married, even if they don't want to.
Okay.
And there were these men chasing after this girl, and she had already been beaten and abused. And these lions hear her crying, and they actually form around her, and they chase the men away.
Okay.
They leave her alone completely unprotected till police officers or guards or whatever come, and they rescue the girl.
Okay, that sounds to me like an urban legend.
It is actually true. I have looked it up because I thought
What?
this is an urban legend.
Okay.
I mean, I saw it on the Animal Planet, and I thought, well, this is still an urban legend, and it has been documented. Now,
Okay.
granted, they weren't talking, and there could be scientific...
All right. So
Because
what that
they-
story comes down to is that the lions chased one guy and not another girl, which is not out of the realm of natural animal behavior.
Yeah, it's different from talking snakes because snakes are physically unable to talk. Lions are able to chase people off and even to have some degree of empathy. I think we see that throughout the animal kingdom, that they'll protect.
Yeah, but I kind of doubt that's what was happening here.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see the details for sure, but at least it's something that seems.
I don't know but I thought it was a fascinating story.
Yeah,
It's a cool story.
And then it boils down to, okay, well, how do you explain it? And saying, well, it must be some kind of intervention from a supreme being. That I think would be a big leap. But it
What
all.
about dolphins leading people to shore?
I have heard
I
about
mean,
that
you see
happening.
lots
I'm
of
not
things
sure
like
to
that.
what extent those stories are also true, but I mean, that seems to. I don't know about those actually, but if they do happen, they still happen in the realm of the natural, basically.
Yeah, and it all boils down to what we were talking before: your framework, what you're kind of predisposed to believe about the world, and how you explain things that you see.
Well, I see your point there. I do agree with a lot of what you're saying. I just, I don't know. My belief is very strong. I think 1 million people could tell me that is absolutely crazy, and I would still believe.
Sure, but I think for some of us, and I don't want to be rude here, but for some of us, the mark of intellectual honesty is being willing to treat everything as open to doubt, including things that you really, really want to believe. And I guess that's where we're coming from, is always being open to the possibility of making a mistake. And so that leads us to work extra hard to try to weed out those mistakes in our own points of view.
Well, that is a noble thing to do, a noble journey, I guess.
Well, and not even necessarily mistakes, but Russell talked about confirmation bias, and and that's something we all do, whether you're skeptical or not. You have to always be on the lookout for that. How many times has somebody drowned and dolphins didn't push them to shore? You remember the thing that's kind of remarkable, but you're not going to remember the stuff that you kind of expect to happen normally.
That's very, and I've often thought that.
We're running out of time.
Okay.
But I'm not kidding. It has been a delight to talk to you, and I look forward to hearing you maybe call back sometime.
Oh, well, thank you. Have a good afternoon.
All right.
You too, Valerie. Appreciate
Bye.
the call.
Bye. Okay, which one of these is going to be the quickest? Daniel. No. Daniel in Florida. What's up?
Hey, how's that spoon going?
Oh, you mean has it turned into a knife?
Yep.
Well, Matt's got it. I haven't heard anything about it turning into a knife, so I'm going to assume no.
All right.
Not to our knowledge.
Before I get to my question, since we're running low on time.
You should really get right to your question, because we're running really low on time.
Okay. Because of the, extraordinary claims take extraordinary evidence, the one about God has to be pretty darn extraordinary, even that it asks so much of, every inch of somebody's life and dedication. To make that kind of leap, would not the only thing that could justify going towards it be absolute certainty?
You mean, do you have to be absolutely certain to be a theist?
Well, no, to be an atheist who's going to convert, per se, would it not take absolute certainty for such a claim and have so much expected of you?
Wait, I'm sorry. Are you saying do atheists need absolute certainty, or do Christians?
In order for an atheist to become a theist,
Okay.
do you need absolute certainty? Is that what you're asking?
Well, not need, but is not the only way to be justified in making that leap absolute certainty?
No, I think, speaking for myself, some really solid evidence of some kind would be sufficient to move in the direction of Christian theology, but it would have to be really, really good.
I know, but
I don't believe there is such a thing as absolute certainty, so maybe that should answer your question.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's even possible to have absolute certainty about anything.
Well, it makes me wonder how it says in the Bible when it says that babies were torn out of stomachs and such. Even if a guy from the clouds came down and said, "I'm God and I'm right. Look at me do magic tricks here, and I'll go rip these babies out." It's still a level of trust, and dedicating an entire life to it, would it be justified?
Yeah, but at a certain point, you don't want to be pig-headed about the things you know. Otherwise, you're headed toward global warming deniers and 9/11 truthers. Anyway, we are out of time.
Sorry about that.
All right, so call back another time, and thank you very much, John, for being on the show.
Thank you, Russell.
I think you're really moving up as a host. I appreciate your contributions.
Oh, thank you.
And we'll see you next week. Bye. El Arroyo.
And clear.
Okay. We got 2 more people on the line for the after show. We'll make it kind of quick, though. Who's this? Nick, Colorado Springs.
That's me.
What's up?
Yeah, I've watched a couple of times. I've always meant to watch as much as I can, but I just have a question. Like, how do you all come about telling family that you're atheist or?
Well, there are a couple of questions I'd always ask about that. First of all, how old are you?
23.
What?
I'm 23.
Okay. Are you financially dependent on your parents still?
No, I'm.
Okay.
That's that. I'm actually in the Army, so.
I'm kind of. Well, that makes things easier. Third question is, how religious are they?
Probably around 9 or 10 on the 1 to 10 scale.
So they're Like, what are they? Fundamentalists?
They're fundamentally non-denominational. My mom is actually kind of danced around with some New Age.
Oh, all right. I wouldn't call that a 9 or a 10. But I mean, they're not way off in the direction of like, you know, convert or burn. You know, all non-believers must be. You know.
Oh, okay. Then yeah, in that case, then no, they aren't that.
Okay.
Hardcore.
I would say, first of all, you're not a kid and you're not financially dependent on your parents. So those are great things in your favor because it means that even if your interactions with your parents are disastrous, it won't ruin your life. The worst thing that can happen is your parents don't talk to you anymore, or they become so aggressive toward you that you don't talk to them anymore. That's like worst case scenario, am I right?
That, yeah, and they're very bad scenarios to be in.
How close are you to your parents?
Well, my father died when I was young, so
okay.
My mom, I'm always been kind of a mama's boy.
Okay, so you love your mom loves you.
This is true.
So I feel like, you know, there's going to be some tension between you when you come out to her, but I think that if you are close enough, you're ultimately going to work through it, like maybe give it a year, maybe less.
Yeah, I'm more, I think my mom's a little understanding at times. It's my sister, and I'm afraid she's going to like, oh, you can't hang out with your nieces because I'm afraid you're going to talk to them about evolution or something like that. The last time they were actually questioning me about my beliefs, and I was kind of trying not to hide it away from my nieces because they're, you know, one's 8, and I don't want to confuse them.
Boy. That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's kind of, it really boils down to what the consequences are for your relationship and if you're willing to deal with the fallout.
Yeah, because really nobody can make that decision but you.
And if you think they really would cut off contact between you and your nieces or your other family members, that, you know, that's something I would consider what's more important to me, and maybe coming out isn't worth that, because you really can't control what your sister decides to do, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's correct. Well, I think this opened a bit of insight for me. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Best of luck. You know, you have the option of not coming out to your family and staying closeted, so it depends on how important this honesty is to you compared to how much connection you want to have to your nieces. And even if your sister and you never agree, things could still work out in the end. It's going to be a gamble no matter what, though.
Yeah.
All right.
I hope it works out.
Thank you.
Good luck. And I guess this is the last one. Christopher in Sweden.
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Damn, I almost forgot my question. Waiting so long. Yeah, a common argument, like, against atheism is that basically.
Are you the guy in Sweden, or did we pick up a different line? Just checking.
Well, no, it's from Sweden.
Okay.
Yeah, a common argument against atheism is that pretty much a life without God sucks, that it doesn't have any meaning at all, and yeah, like, if there is no God and, you know, we are just a combination of atoms, why would you, like, what is the purpose of life? Why would you even go through it? And I feel like nobody ever says, like, the common response from atheists are often, like, trying to, you know, they'll say stuff like, you know, the meaning of life to me is finding out what the meaning of life is or whatever, you know. And I'm just wondering what your take on that is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the meaning of life is what meaning we give to it. And I've never understood that argument, that just because you believe in a God, how does that give your life any more meaning than it had before? I think either way, you create your own meaning. And that's just a cop-out. I think that's somebody who has that framework not understanding how somebody could not be the same as them.
Yeah. I mean, that's not. I understand that that view is not necessarily mine, but I'm just saying a lot of atheists have that. That's what they say normally when they get get that question. But
Yeah.
what I don't ever hear anybody say is like, obviously the way you refer to meaning is not the same way that the people that are asking the question are.
Yeah.
You know, they mean like a purpose, and not just something to do or having a fun life. And what I feel like nobody ever says is like, why would there be a meaning to life? Why would there be a purpose? It sounds kind of boring and depressing, but it feels like nobody really brings that up, that there's meaning is something that we really want, but there's no, I do not at all see why there would be a purpose of any kind.
Yeah, at least not with some overriding grand purpose that you don't make for yourself. I think it just boils down to that people who believe want to have a reason to believe. And they think that gives their life some meaning, so they don't understand if you don't have that to hang on to, how you could have any meaning. It's sort of just like not understanding what another person's viewpoint, because it doesn't fit in with their framework. So what they're really saying is, if I didn't have God to hang on to, I wouldn't feel any meaning in my life. Therefore, how can you? That's kind of kind of the way I look at it. And I just say, my life has the meaning I create for it. It can be as meaningful or meaningless as I decide.
Yeah. But do you not at all feel like that could be the case, though, that it kind of sucks? Like, wouldn't you not want there to be a God that was like, not necessarily one in the Bible, but like an awesome God that was just loving and caring and everything had a meaning and an afterlife and stuff like that,
I think you should keep in mind that the sunny portrayal of God as all loving and caring and stuff is kind of contrasted with a lot of actual things in the Bible, where God says that, he's a vengeful God and a jealous God, there's a lot of theology from the, let's say, 16th, 17th centuries thereabouts, which portrays God as an angry God who despises humanity, but barely, holds back his contempt and keeps from throwing them into the pit of hell because of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, and that's it. The notion of God has gone through a lot of different changes as culture has gone through, and I think that life is no more or less meaningful with a belief in God than without it. So I think we're left with the idea of nailing down what's true rather than trying to figure out which belief will make us feel better. And of course, there are a lot of things that make life worth living, and very few of them really have to do with the notion of a God or living forever.
No, yeah, definitely, I agree. But would you not want there to be a God, like, like a fun God?
The God described in the Old Testament, frankly, I can do without him.
Well, but like the one that most uneducated Christians think the beliefs in.
Even then, there are a lot of weird and demented things about the idea of, the only way to get eternal life is to worship me.
Well, and even if we threw all that out and said, okay, we're going to make up this new God that's all good and loving and cares about us, and that doesn't make it true. So then it boils down to, okay, do you want to believe in something just because it feels good, or do you want to believe in stuff that's real and that you can, that you have some reason to believe in? And that's just something people have to decide. But I'd like to believe things that are true, and I guess I'd rather do that than believe in something just because that makes me feel better.
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. Well,
Okay.
am I completely out of time now, or?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we're gonna head for dinner pretty soon. But
All right.
you know, thanks for calling, and I hope you work these issues out in your mind.
All right. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks
All
for
right.
calling.
See ya.
Yes. Thanks a lot. See you.
To the people in the chat room discussing the Avengers and wondering why anybody needs other Avengers when Thor is around. From what I've heard, the early Marvel comics with the Avengers actually pretty much boiled down to all the other Avengers fight each other and squabble and get nothing done, and pretty much make all the problems themselves. And then Thor shows up and fixes everything for them, which in a way is kind of what happened in the movie. So you don't really need other Avengers. They probably make things worse, but they're funny.
That sounds a little like the Greek gods, too.
It does sound
Haven't-
like the Greek gods.
Have to be straightened out by Zeus.
Yep. Okay, see you later.